to start a new study of the Lament Psalms. We've studied praise Psalms, and Saturday night I was talking to these guys at this singles and seniors Christmas party that we had here, and Jan told one of the guys that we were getting ready to start studying the Lament Psalms. And he said, Lament Psalms? He said, that's all so downbeat and sad. I said, it's not downbeat and sad. It's about us. It's about how we can relate to God when we're going through things that cause us to be anxious or to be fearful or things like that. So that's what we're going to talk about. And there's 41 of them. And we're probably not going to study them all. But I need to figure out a list for what we are going to study. The Lament Psalms. But a Lament Psalm, let me read this to you. The great Protestant reformer Martin Luther, have you heard of him? Treasured the Psalms of Lament. Of them, he said, what is the greatest thing in the Psalter but this earnest speaking amid the storm winds of every kind? Where do you find deeper, more sorrowful, more pitiful words of sadness than in the Psalms of lamentation? There again you look into the hearts of the saints as unto death, yes, as unto hell itself. When they speak of fear and hope, they use such words that no painter could so depict for your fear or hope, and no Cicero or other orator has so portrayed them. And they speak these words to God and with God. This, I repeat, is the best thing of all. These Psalms are about us. I mean, that's the only way I know to describe them. They go through times when they're like what we go through, and we say, how come I don't feel different? I called on God. How come I didn't feel different when I did? Where was He when I was going through this? You know, have you ever had somebody want to chase you wherever you went, and when he catches you, he wants to kill you? Have you ever had that? David did. It went on for from his perspective, seemingly forever. We're going to talk about that today. But this psalm, when I read it, I don't think about David at all. I think about me. We're going to look at that. On that page, those papers I've handed out, there's two synopses of psalms. But the first summary that I really want us to look at is from the Broadman commentary. That's at Roman numeral 2. And it goes through all of those various categories of praise psalms. And then you flip to the second page, and it has the lament psalms. So it's the very last page in that group. Very last page is the laments. There's two groups of them. One is individual laments. That's what we're going to be looking at. And one is community laments. Laments that refer to a people, refer to a church, refer to a group, okay? The ones that I want to look at are ones for individual laments. And what it says there on that page is, there are 40 of them, there's one that I added 57, so that makes 41, contain individual laments stemming from spiritual, mental, physical, and mental suffering. I got that in there twice. Nearly all contain an expression of confident faith in God for what He is about to do and what He is utterly certain to do in time. Okay? The guys that are in these Psalms are going through spiritual or mental or physical suffering. They call on God, expecting Him to act. But we're going to see that he doesn't always act. But they know that he will eventually. Yeah. So, you want to tell us how to do that? How to be that way? It's kind of hard. It is hard. Because what we want to do is like the kid with the broken airplane. He tries to fix it. He takes it to his daddy. He watches his daddy fumbling around with it. And he finally just grabs it and takes it back and said, I'll just do it myself. That's where we find ourselves sometimes. You know, we try to deal with our problem on our own. And when all that fails, we go to God. And then sometimes we end up taking it back. So we're going to talk about that. So today we're going to just cover Psalm 57. I hope I turned that on. Yeah. So let's look at Psalm 57. And it's about David. Y'all just studied 1 Samuel, didn't you? 1 Samuel 18:5. I'm not going to do this, usually. I'm not going to go back, jump around all through the Bible, talking about these Psalms like we did when we studied Jude and every other book we've ever studied. These Psalms I really look at like it's about me or it's about you. But sometimes it helps to know why the Psalm was written. 1 Samuel 18:5 says this, if I can find it. Who did David spend his time running from? Saul made a career out of it, it seems like. 1 Samuel 18:5 says this, whatever Saul sent him to do, David did it so successfully that Saul gave him a high rank in the army. This pleased all the people and Saul's officers as well. Yay! David did a good job. He gets praise for it. 6 and 7. It says, when the men were returning home after David had killed the Philistine, the women came out from the towns of Israel to meet King Saul with singing and dancing, with joyful songs and with tambourines and lutes. Sounds pretty good. Verse 7 says, as they danced, they sang, Saul has slain his thousands, and David tens of thousands. Right away, we're starting to see the problem, right? Saul is he's saying, this little twit, he's taking my glory. So what starts to develop? All right. Verse 8 and 9. So Saul was very angry. This refrain galled him. They have credited David with tens of thousands, he thought, but me with only thousands. What more can he get out of the kingdom? And from that time on, Saul kept a jealous eye on David. Saul chases and pursues David, wanting to kill him. Now, I never really understood that when I was younger studying this stuff. It makes all perfect sense to me now. But Saul spent a long time wanting to chase David down and kill him, and it spilled over from jealousy. That's where it all started. I'll just get rid of him. That takes the problem. So, but he also feared David. Chapter 8, 1 Samuel 18:29 says this. Saul became still more afraid of him, and he remained his enemy the rest of his days. I guess he was afraid of him because of the power he was developing. I don't know why. 23 is about the pursuit of David. Saul is just chasing him everywhere. Then we come to chapter 24, and David and his men find themselves in the same cave with Saul. Saul's in this cave, and David is in there too, but Saul doesn't know that David is in there. Verse 4, let me flip over to 24, chapter 24. 24, verse 4, second part of verse 4 says, David and his men, were far back in the cave. Oops. Oh yeah. David and his men were far back in the cave. The men said, This is the very day the Lord spoke of when he said to you, I will give your enemy into your hands for you to deal with as you wish. Then David crept up unnoticed and cut off the corner of Saul's robe. Saul doesn't know David's in the cave. He's sitting there, probably asleep or something, but David says, I'll just walk up behind him and cut off the corner of his robe. That's what the Bible says. What could he have done? If he's close enough to do that, he's close enough to kill the guy. Okay, so what happens is had David killed Saul, the threat from Saul referred to in Psalm 57 as his enemy would have been taken out of the picture. That threat would no longer be real for David if he kills Saul. But verse 16 to 19, I think I have not written down. Verse 16 to 19, I think in 24. Let me see what this says. Yeah, that's right. Let me read 16 to 19 of chapter 24. When David finished saying this, Saul asked, Is that your voice, David, my son? And he wept aloud. You are more righteous than I, he said. You have treated me well, but I have treated you badly. You have just now told me of the good you did to me. The Lord delivered me into your hands, but you did not kill me. He realized, he was really upset that somebody had whacked off part of his robe, but he finds out it's David, and he realizes that you were close enough to kill me. Verse 19 says, When a man get away unharmed, may the Lord reward you well for the way you treated me today. Saul's heart was different than David's. Saul was out there to kill David. David recognizes Saul as the Lord's anointed, and he says, I'm not going to kill him. I've got every opportunity to do it. My men they think I should do it, but I'm not going to do it. Psalm 57 reflects on David's pain and fear from the pursuit from Saul with his intent on killing David. So let's go to Psalm 57. That's the background. That's all I'm going to do. I could have spent hours talking about that, because I'm really not even all that familiar with it, but I know that he spent a lifetime chasing David. So we're at Psalm 57, and verses 1 through 3 is a threefold prayer. It's hide me. The outline is hide me, hear me, and the third one was help me. There we go. That's the first 3 points of that prayer. Hide, hear, and help. Okay, David cries out. Let me read verse 1. Verse 1. Have mercy on me, O God, have mercy on me, for in you my soul takes refuge. I will take refuge in the shadow of your wings until the disaster has passed. David cries out for mercy, and he does it with a double cry. He says, have mercy on me, have mercy on me. He does it twice. To me, this indicates that he has had about all he can take. When a cry for mercy goes out, It must go to the person who has the power to grant mercy. Doesn't do any, Wayne, if you need mercy from somebody, doesn't do any good for you to cry out to mercy from me. If you need mercy from somebody else, you need it from that person. That's the person you cry out to. So in such case, the grant is totally up to the person who has the power to give it. I think how simple it should be to cry out to Saul for mercy, but he's already shown that he would rather kill David. David cries out to mercy to God. Why did he just cry out to Saul? Saul's the one who wants to kill him. That's the point. If I cry out, I need somebody that's going to get something done for me. He's already seen Saul's heart is different than his. David could have killed Saul. He did not, because of who Saul is, how God related to Saul. He anointed him. He chose him to be king. But yet he wants to kill David. So he cries out to God. So for David, God has already granted mercy unto eternal salvation. He's not asking for his salvation. He's already got that. But the mercy David cries out for is in the physical world. He wants his physical life protected. The cry for mercy means a cry for deliverance. Deliverance from fear. Now you ought to be able to, the way I'm teaching this today, you ought to start seeing yourself in here. You know, the cry for mercy is for deliverance from fear, a deliverance from pain, and deliverance from death. That was his main thing. He knows he is in danger of being killed. David has thrown up his soul for refuge in God. I would say this meant he is seeking peace that is free from anxiety. We've already talked about that today. You know, the kind of peace we need in every case is to be free of anxiety. The Bible says we should. It even preaches that anxiety is a sin. If you go over to, it seems like it's Philippians, but yet we get anxious. The kind of peace he wants is free as anxiety. The last part of verse 1 indicates that David is doing more than hoping for mercy. He is claiming it as a foregone conclusion. That sounds like faith to me. If you read that verse 1, he has already claimed mercy from God, even though he hasn't gotten it yet. He said, I will take refuge in the shadow of your wings. I will take refuge. He is claiming that mercy and that deliverance. He said he will take refuge in the shadow of God's wings. I suspect this is a metaphor for the protection a mother hen has given to her chicks. A baby chick, this came to me this morning, a baby chick only knows the confidence which comes through the protection from the mother hen. Whenever danger comes, they shelter in place, wherever they are. When danger comes, wherever they are, they shelter in place. Have you heard that term? Shelter in place? What's getting ready to happen when they say shelter in place? It happens in lockdown in schools, right? You are to shelter in place wherever you are when that danger comes. That's the way the baby chick does. He runs to his mother wherever they are. He runs to his mother for protection. All right, verse 2. Hear me. Verse 2 says this. I cry out to God Most High, to God who fulfills his purpose for me. Now this I found very interesting. David cries out to God with confidence, knowing he would be heard. If we could only look at the Hebrew for this verse, the King James, I don't suppose anybody's got the King James, do they? Huh? Yeah, read that verse to King James. Verse 2.
I will cry unto God most high, unto God that performeth all things for me.
The God that performs all things for me. Those words, now that's the King James. That's the closest to what I want to tell you that I could find, so that's why I chose that. Those words, all things, are not in the Hebrew. I was reading Phillips. He says this is a fill-in-the-blank prayer. I just put in there what I want. All things is put. Now, all things sounds pretty good to me, but the guy that's translating this for the sake of uh, adding meaning to what it is you're reading, he put all things in there. But what if you need mercy with something you want to put specific? Could you put that in there? But it's a fill-in-the-blank, and I thought that was very interesting because all things is not there. Put in there what you want. Verse 3 is help me. Verse 3 says this. He sends from heaven and saves me, rebuking those who hotly pursue me. Now it's starting to sound like David. Rebuking those who hotly pursue me. God sends his love and his faithfulness. Very clearly, David is looking for deliverance from Saul, the one who hotly pursues him. Now, I didn't tell you this. How do I know this is about Saul? Go all the way back up to the top of the chapter, right under where it says Psalm 57. It tells you this is about when David was in the cave with Saul. It says, for the director of music to the tune of Do Not Destroy of David when he had fled from Saul into the cave. So it's one of the few times you'd actually know what this is supposed to be talking about. Okay? So he clearly, very clearly, David is looking for deliverance from Saul, the one who hotly pursues him. But David looks for more than deliverance from harm. What am I talking about, I wonder? The key lies in the real meaning of love and faithfulness. NIV says love and faithfulness. If you go to the King James, it says mercy and truth. It sounds like two different things. Mercy and truth sound different than love and faithfulness. Mercy would be mercy in regards to harm, but what about how the word truth applies? It said mercy and truth. See if I can make sense out of my own notes. Remember 1 Samuel 24, 16 to 19, their hearts were different. Saul told David, says, you reacted to me a lot differently than the way I want to react to you. Our hearts are different. David had already indicated his respect for Saul when he called him God's anointed. David wants Saul to recognize that truth. David wants Saul to recognize that truth. Change his attitude and his heart and let peace prevail between the two. That is what David wants. The truth of the change in heart that comes through peace with God. And that kind of peace can change our relationship, David's and Saul's relationship. That is David's desire and meaning of the word truth here, but Saul, he never changed. He never changed. We're going to see that as we go through here. David is asking for deliverance from Saul, and I think he actually wants God to do something about it right now. We'll see what happens as we go on. Verse 4 and 6 describe the crisis which threatens David. Verse 4 is the seriousness of of the situation, I can easily relate to verse 1 to 3 for myself. I call out to God as David did, usually when I am at the end of my rope, as David was. David's run out of place to run. Where he goes, Saul has made it his life work to track him down. He's running out of places to go. He was at a point where he probably thought he could not take it anymore. But the truth, here's what I want you to always remember. I want you to remember you heard it right here. I want you to remember when you're at the point where you think you can't take it anymore. The truth of the matter is you can and take more, and if need be, you will take more because God's grace is sufficient. David, he sounds like he's wound pretty tight reading this psalm. But he can take more. We've got that promise. 2 Corinthians 12:9. David has called God onto the scene. Now here we go. David has called God onto the scene right there in those first 3 verses, probably after he has already seen the doctors. He's already seen the therapist. He's already, talked to all of his friends, his Christian friends, his non-Christian friends. He's already talked to all of them. Got nowhere else to go. So where does he go? He calls on God. He has called him out into the scene, but he has not yet done anything about David's predicament. That's where we are. Man, I just got to turn this over to God. I'm turning it over to you, God. I don't see anything happening, God. Don't see anything happening. Don't hear anything. Don't feel anything different. It's kind of where David is. He has called him on the scene, but he has not done anything about David's predicament. Look where David is. He is in a very serious situation. Verse 4 says this. I am in the midst of lions. I lie among ravenous beasts, men whose teeth are spears and arrows, whose tongues are sharp swords. I don't know that I've ever been there.
I think tongues are sharp swords.
Can relate to part of it for sure.
I can relate to that piece of just somebody's words stabbing you, either in the back where you don't hear it until later, or right. Yeah.
Are these people that have it want to make it their life's work to get you? Off to the side in my Bible, I say at work, at home, with family, with friends. It can happen anywhere. It never gets better, right? David is quickly running out of places where he can hide. This sounds like a problem we encounter at work, maybe at home, with family, with friends, with people much more powerful than we are. That's the thing. Maybe it's people that are more powerful than we are, and that we don't have any recourse. Don't feel like we have any recourse. We have no place to run. We might as well go to God. Tried everything else. I'll just try God. Verse 5 says this, the sovereign Savior, verse 5. Be exalted, O God, above the heavens. Let your glory be over all the earth. I had a little trouble thinking about that verse before I read the commentary. One of them said, exalt yourself, God. Now's the time. I've cried out for mercy. I've got this problem. It's a well-defined problem. You know what it is. Exalt yourself. Show them what you got. I don't know if that's right or not, because he repeats that later in the psalm, and that's not the same feeling I got. You are higher than the heavens. Let your praises be universally proclaimed over all of the earth. Wouldn't that be nice? Just miraculously take me out of this situation, or better yet, resolve the situation the way I want it resolved. I think that's exactly what he wants. And what we want, I'm speaking for the group, I'm speaking for myself. You cry out to God, and what is it you want? You want him to do what I want you to do, and everything will be just fine. Fix it. It's kind of where David is. I think he'd take anything. But he knows that he doesn't want Saul chasing him anymore. All right, verse 6. The significance of his salvation. Verse 6. They spread a net. Now this is really wild right here. They spread a net for my feet. I was bowed down in distress. They dug a pit in my path, but they have fallen into it themselves. Now that's starting to sound more like it. This, the ungodly busily go about preparing the downfall of the righteous. That's what you were talking about a minute ago. You got people who are just after you. They may hate you for, we've talked about it here before, just because you're a Christian. You know, they don't like it. Or for other reasons. They don't like you getting the promotion at work. It'd been a long time since I had to even deal with those kind of issues, but you know, they don't like it because you got the promotion and they didn't. So they're going to make it their life's work to get even with you. It's kind of like starting to sound like it's pretty easy to put ourselves into this song. Nobody in here has had anybody chasing them, wanting to kill them. But, or maybe you have, but nobody I know of. But it's pretty, except for that, it's pretty easy to put yourself in here. You know, David said, just exalt yourself. Just go do what I want you to do. Okay, the ungodly busily goes about preparing the downfall of the righteous, would call malice. That is one ugly word. I never dwelled on what the word malice means, but when we were talking about, like we were talking in probably Ephesians or something like that, where Christians were to get rid of every kind of malice. Malice is one ugly word. Malice is not only glad when something bad happens to you, but they rejoice in it, and they might even plan for it. They want you to get the worst of everything. That is what malice is. So, Hamas is a perfect word. Fierce anger in Psalm 25. It's on here too, by the way. Right there. We're gonna hit Psalm 25 pretty hard someday, but they were after David, and they were showing him fierce anger, and that Hebrew word for fierce anger, I don't think you've heard this before from me, is Hamas. Fierce anger. Okay. To that end, they dig a pit on the path. This is a technique for hunters. They dig a hole on the game trail for an animal to fall in it, and David was surely feeling the pressure of it all. He was bowed down in distress, it says in the second part of that verse. That's where he was. He was bowed down. He was feeling depressed because of it. The last part of that verse is, they will fall into their own trap. And I thought, well, what's that all about? You know how Saul died? He killed himself on the battlefield. He fell on his own sword. And he wouldn't do it. I'm not going to kill the king. He fell on his own sword. You know, we've talked about bitterness. We've talked about anger. We've talked about all kinds of things that if you leave them in your head and in your heart, what does it do to you? It festers. It does more to you than it could ever do to the person that you're harboring those feelings against. And I don't know what that had to do with Saul's death, his hatred of David, his jealousy of David, but he ended up killing himself. They have fallen into it their own selves. David should recognize that this happens under the purpose and direction of God. We can say, well, it turns out I didn't have to worry about that, God. I could have taken care of that myself. Coincidence? No, it's not coincidence. It's providence. David says, I call on you. Please show me some mercy. Here's my problem. Now, I guess I just wait. And what are you waiting on? You're waiting on God's providence. He works out everything. He may not work it out when you want it. He may not work it out how you want it worked out. But He works things out. And we call it God's providence. They will fall into the pit they dug themselves. That's what I call providence. What if you call it coincidence? Now, this suicide of another guy. Jan and I know a guy that was a new Christian. This is a phenomenal story. He was a new Christian. He's a guy that always had money, but he was falling on financial hard times. And there was a man in his community that tormented this guy. I don't know all the details of the story, but he just tormented him. He threatened him with lawsuits and all of these things. You know what happened to that man? He was killed in a car wreck. The one that was doing the tormenting, not the new Christian, but the Saul of the story was killed in a car wreck. I don't know if God did that, but I know it solved that guy's problem. What if we call that coincidence? If you say, well, wasn't that lucky? I've told y'all that here before we need to get the word luck out of our vocabulary as Christians. We could say, wasn't that lucky? The guy was killed, that solved the guy's problem. The problem is, if he could call that lucky or coincidence, what is he going to trust in the next time? It's much easier to say that was God's providence. I turned it over to God, and this is what happened. I can turn the next thing over to God too. All right, let's keep going. David had so many chances to kill Saul, but he knows that this is not what God wants him. He waits on providence. Saul ultimately commits suicide on the battlefield. We already talked about that. Verse 7 says this, my heart is steadfast, O God, my heart is steadfast. I will sing and make music. He waits, he has no doubt, no depression. So sure is he that he says it twice. His heart is steadfast. So sure is he confidence on that God will act that he says it twice. David's heart overflows. He sings and makes music. David is sure, he is steadfast that he will never doubt again. God took care of it this time. I'm never going to doubt again. Reckon? I hardly think so. That's yeah, exactly. David he's thrilled. His heart is steadfast. I can never doubt God again. But he will. We all will. Verse 8 and 9 says this, awake, my soul, awake, harp and lyre, I will awaken the dawn. 8. David will awaken the innermost being, his soul. Awake my soul. That's a deep level to be awakened at. Your soul level. That's deeper than when we get to chapter 25, where it's deeper than the upper lifted hand. It's deeper than the heart. It's at the soul. That's the deepest level in a man you can go to. He awakens his soul. Phillips gives Phillips never gives references. That's the thing that gripes me. It's so much work. He's got such great commentaries, but you got to do so much work because you got to figure out what he's saying. Then you got to go find where it is in the Bible many times. But here's what he says: David was exhausted after being pursued by Saul, and he needed some rest. Now, if y'all know where this is, let me know. He says, as his head hits the pillow, I'm exhausted, not ungrateful. I will awaken my soul earlier than the dawn and give you the praise you deserve. Have you ever been so tired? If somebody's chasing you all the time, wanting to kill you, you're probably going to be really exhausted emotionally and spiritually every single night you go to bed. But that's how David was. I'm going to awake my soul in the morning. I'm too tired right now, but I will when I wake up. Okay, verse 9 says this: I will praise you, O Lord, among the nations. I will sing of you among the peoples. David is in overflow mode. He is full to overflowing, and he expresses it in enthusiastic evangelistic witness. He's talking about the nations and so on and so forth. He worships. Verse 10 says, for great is your love reaching to the heavens. I would love what the King James says on this. For great is your love reaching to the heavens, your faithfulness reaching to the skies. It's the same thing. That love is actually mercy in the King James, and faithfulness is actually truth. Faithfulness is actually truth in the King James. So he's expressing mercy reaching to the heavens. You remember back in verse 3. Back in verse 3, he sent his mercy and his truth down from heaven. Now David is sending it back up in praise. Phillips says, David reacted with mercy and truth to Saul. He spared Saul's life, and he reacted in truth to Saul, he reacted in truth to Saul when he acknowledged that Saul was God's anointed one. And verse 11 says this: Be exalted, O God, above the heavens. Let your glory be over all the earth. He worshiped God in his majesty. David I wish I could read that word. It repeats verse 5. Same thing, verse 5. Saul, there in Israel, was sitting on a throne. David will be sitting on a throne. Phillips says, but higher and lifted up beyond all of the suns and stars of space was one exalted in majesty above the very heavens. It's God. What a God he is. He is tremendous enough to create galaxies, yet tender enough to care for one frightened man as a hen cares for her chicks. This summarizes the source of the psalmist's confidence and hope. That's all I got.